When 76-year-old Evelyn Carter was denied her first-class seat, she quietly accepted the embarrassment, unaware that her son, Liam Carter, owned the airline. Having spent her life sacrificing for him, she never sought special treatment, only fairness. But when Liam learned of the incident, a heartfelt revelation began. What happened next would change more than just a flight. It would touch lives forever. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Liam Carter's mother denied a first-class seat. Unaware her son owns the airline, the flight attendant barely glanced at the elderly woman before shaking her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but first class is reserved for paying passengers." The woman, dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, hesitated. Her ticket was for economy, but at her age, now in her late 70s, she had hoped for a little kindness. Little did she know, the very airline she was flying on belonged to her son, Liam Carter. It was a chilly morning in December 2023. Evelyn Carter, a retired costume designer, had always been a woman of grace and humility. She never relied on her son's fame or fortune, nor did she ever expect special treatment. She had booked this flight to Los Angeles for a quiet family gathering, never mentioning who she was or the Hollywood icon she had raised. As she stood at the check-in counter, the young airline staff member barely looked up when she requested an upgrade. "I'm sorry, first class is full," the woman said flatly, already turning her attention to the next customer. Evelyn nodded, not wanting to argue, but behind her, another passenger had overheard the exchange, a businessman in his 50s, who happened to recognize her. "Wait a second," he murmured to himself, glancing at her again. He had seen her face before in old interviews, standing beside Liam at premieres. His curiosity grew, and before long, murmurs began spreading among passengers. Some took out their phones, whispering. Meanwhile, Liam Carter, unaware of the incident, was on his way to the same flight, having planned a surprise visit for his mother. He had always preferred to fly discreetly, dressed in his usual low-key attire, jeans, a simple jacket, a baseball cap pulled low. As he approached the gate, he immediately noticed attention in the air. People were staring at his mother, whispering among themselves. "What's going on?" Liam asked a nearby passenger. The businessman turned, recognizing him instantly. "Your mother?" "They refuse to upgrade her seat," he said hesitantly. Liam's expression darkened. He walked straight to the counter, where the same attendant who had dismissed his mother now looked up, only to freeze in shock. The actor's reputation was well-known, humble, kind, but fiercely protective of his loved ones. He leaned in slightly, his voice calm but firm. "Is there a reason why my mother wasn't offered a seat in first class?" The attendant swallowed nervously, suddenly realizing the weight of her mistake. Passengers around them fell silent, their eyes darting between Liam and his mother. Evelyn, ever the gentle soul, reached for her son's arm. "Liam, it's fine," she whispered. "I didn't want to cause a fuss." But it was too late. The entire airport was now buzzing with whispers. Liam took a deep breath, glancing at the crowd, then back at the stunned airline staff. He had built his airline not just as a business, but as a reflection of his values, kindness, respect, and humility. And in that moment, he knew exactly what needed to be done. Liam's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "You're telling me there was no way to accommodate my mother? Not a single seat available in first class." The attendant's face paled. The passengers nearby had gone completely silent, their attention locked into the unfolding moment. Someone muttered, "She raised Liam Carter, and they couldn't even give her a better seat?" Evelyn squeezed her son's arm gently, her eyes filled with the quiet patience of a woman who had endured far more difficult things in life. "Liam," she whispered, "it's just a seat. I don't want to make a scene." But the scene had already made itself. People were filming. Some were shaking their heads, murmuring about respect, about kindness, about the irony of an airline denying comfort to the mother of the man who owned it. Liam turned to his mother, his expression softening. "Mom, you never asked for anything. Not from me, not from anyone. You deserve better." And then, without another word, he did something that made the entire airport gasp. He pulled his own first-class ticket from his pocket, turned to the elderly man sitting beside Evelyn in the economy line, and handed it over. "Here, take my seat." The man, clearly confused, stammered, "I what? No, I can't." But Liam was already helping his mother with her bag, guiding her toward the boarding gate. "If first class isn't good enough for my mother," he said quietly, "then it isn't good enough for me either." The staff stood frozen. The other passengers erupted into whispers, some smiling, some shaking their heads in disbelief. It wasn't about wealth or power. It was about something much deeper. By the time they boarded, Evelyn had tears in her eyes. She looked at her son, the boy she had raised through hardship, the man who had never let fame change his heart. "You didn't have to do that." Liam gave his mother a small, knowing smile. "Mom, you've given me everything. A seat is the least I can give you." Evelyn shook her head, her fingers tightening around his hand as they walked through the narrow aisle of the plane. Passengers turned to watch them, their expressions a mixture of admiration and quiet understanding. Some whispered his name, but Liam wasn't focused on any of them, only on his mother. The economy seats were cramped, but Liam didn't hesitate. He gently helped Evelyn into her seat by the window, tucking a blanket over her lap, as if she were the most important person in the world. To him, she was a young flight attendant, different from the one at check-in, hurried over, her face flushed. She had clearly heard what had happened. "Mr. Carter, sir, we can arrange something." But Liam shook his head. "We're fine here," he said simply. "Just take care of her." The flight attendant swallowed hard, nodding, before disappearing down the aisle. As the plane took off, Evelyn turned to her son, her eyes shimmering. "I don't need first class, Liam. I just need time with you." Liam looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long while, he saw how time had touched her face, the lines around her eyes, the gentle frailty in her hands. Signs of a woman who had spent her life sacrificing for others. A lump formed in his throat. He reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "Then that's what you'll have, Mom." The hum of the engines filled the space between them. But in that moment, there was nothing else. No Hollywood, no cameras, no fame. Just a son and his mother, sitting side by side as they had so many years before, when he was just a boy who had nothing but dreams and the love of the woman who believed in him before the world ever did. But what they didn't know was that someone else on that plane had been watching. Someone whose decision in the next few hours would change everything. As the plane cruised through the sky, a man in first class sat motionless, his eyes fixed on Liam and his mother. His name was Robert Hayes, a wealthy executive in the airline industry, a man who had spent years making decisions that put profits before people. He had never thought twice about it until now. He had watched the whole thing unfold. The way the airline staff dismissed Evelyn. The way Liam had given up his luxury seat without hesitation. It gnawed at something deep inside him. Robert shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his untouched glass of champagne. The flight attendant refilled it without him asking, flashing the automatic empty smile of someone trained to serve, without truly seeing the person in front of them. His gaze drifted back to Liam and Evelyn. They weren't talking much, just sitting in easy silence. Liam had his mother's frail hand in his own, occasionally adjusting her blanket, making sure she was comfortable. There was no frustration in his movements, no sense of obligation, just pure love. Robert exhaled slowly. He had spent his life in boardrooms, discussing ways to maximize airline revenue, cutting costs, removing perks, minimizing customer service where possible. But now, watching this moment, a mother who had once carried the weight of raising her son alone, and a son who now carried the weight of the world, but still chose to put her first, he felt something crack inside him. Halfway through the flight, he stood. The first-class passengers barely noticed as he made his way toward the back of the plane, but the flight attendants did. Their eyes widened as he stopped beside Liam's row. Liam looked up, surprised to see a sharply dressed man standing there. Robert cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter," he began, his voice quieter than he intended. Evelyn looked between the two men, sensing something unspoken in the air. Liam just waited, his expression calm. Robert hesitated. Then in a low voice he said, I own a majority share in this airline. Liam's face didn't change, but there was a subtle shift in his eyes, a quiet understanding. Robert glanced at Evelyn. I saw what happened back at the gate, and I saw what you did. He exhaled sharply as if the words were heavier than he expected. I want you to know I've spent my whole life making decisions that, well, let's just say I never thought much about people. Just numbers. His jaw tightened. But tonight, you reminded me of something, of what really matters. Liam remained silent, letting the man find his words. Robert took a deep breath. I want to change that. Starting now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek leather-bound notebook. With a flick of his pen, he wrote something quickly, then tore the page out and handed it to Liam. Liam unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words. His mother appeared over his shoulder, and when she saw what was written, her breath hitched. A single sentence signed with Robert's name and authority. Effective immediately, Evelyn Carter is granted lifetime first-class access on every airline under my ownership. No ticket required. Evelyn covered her mouth, her eyes welling with tears. She tried to speak, but her voice failed her. Liam looked up at Robert, his expression unreadable. Finally, after a long moment, he nodded, a quiet, respectful nod. One man acknowledging another, not for power or money, but for the simple act of doing what was right. Robert let out a breath, as if he had been holding it in for years. It's the least I can do, he murmured. Then before anyone could say another word, he turned and walked back to his seat. The plane hummed around them, passengers lost in their own worlds. But for Evelyn, this moment, this unexpected kindness, felt larger than life. She squeezed her son's hand, her voice trembling. Liam, but he just smiled, wiping a tear from her cheek with the back of his hand. I told you, Mom, you deserve the best. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. And for the rest of the flight, she didn't care about first class, luxury, or anything else. She had her son beside her. That was more than enough. But neither of them knew. This moment was only the beginning of something much bigger. As the plane glided through the night sky, Evelyn closed her eyes, her fingers still curled around a handwritten note. She had never asked for recognition, never sought privilege. She had spent her life behind the scenes, sewing costumes in dimly lit rooms, stretching every dollar to raise Liam alone, making sure he had love even when they had nothing else. And now, after all these years, a stranger had seen her, truly seen her. Liam glanced down at her, watching the steady rise and fall of her breath. He knew his mother better than anyone, knew that even now she was overwhelmed, not by the luxury of a first-class pass, but by the gesture. She wasn't used to being taken care of. That was the part that made his heart ache. A flight attendant approached cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Carter, I just wanted to say that was the kindest thing I've ever seen. Liam gave her a small, tired smile. It wasn't kindness. It was the right thing to do. The flight attendant hesitated, then pulled something from her pocket, a small envelope. Someone asked me to give this to you. Liam furrowed his brows as he took it. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar. He carefully slid open the envelope, pulling out a folded piece of paper. Sometimes it only takes one moment to change a life. Today you changed mine. Thank you. No signature, no name, just those words. Liam stared at it for a long moment. He had never done things for attention, never expected anything in return. But this was different. Somewhere on this plane, a life had shifted, and he didn't even know whose. The pilot's voice crackled over the speaker, announcing their descent into Los Angeles. The city lights glittered below, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Liam gently nudged his mother awake, and she stirred, blinking up at him with a soft smile. As they exited the plane, whispers followed them. Passengers exchanged knowing glances, some smiling, others deep in thought. It wasn't about celebrity anymore. It was about something far more human. But just as Liam and Evelyn stepped into the terminal, a voice called from behind. Mr. Carter, wait. Liam turned. A woman mid-30s, disheveled but with kind eyes, rushed toward him. She clutched a crumpled boarding pass in one hand, her other hand trembling slightly. I was on the flight, she said, her breath uneven. I saw what you did for your mother. Liam tilted his head. Waiting, she swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. I haven't spoken to my mom in 10 years. We had a falling out, and I thought I'd lost my chance. But seeing you tonight, the way you love her, it made me realize I still have time to make things right. Liam's throat tightened. He glanced at Evelyn, who was already wiping away tears. I just bought a ticket, the woman continued. I'm flying to see her tomorrow. I needed you to know that what you did tonight, it didn't just matter to your mother. It mattered to me. It mattered to all of us. Liam didn't speak right away. He simply reached out, gently squeezing her shoulder. It's never too late, he said softly. The woman nodded, pressing a shaky hand to her lips before turning to leave. Evelyn exhaled, gripping her son's arm. You see, Liam, she whispered, you've always had a gift, not just for acting, but for reminding people what truly matters. Liam looked around. The world was still moving, the airport still buzzing with hurried travelers, flight announcements and rolling suitcases. But in this small corner, something had shifted. As they walked through the airport, Evelyn leaned into Liam's arm, her steps slower than they used to be. The years had made her frilier, but her heart was still strong enough to hold the weight of a lifetime's memories. Liam could feel the warmth of her hand in his, the same hand that had held his as a child, when they walked through unfamiliar cities, searching for a home, searching for stability. He remembered the times when she had gone without food, so he could eat, the nights she worked late, stitching costumes by candlelight, never once complaining. And now here they were, mother and son, walking side by side in an airport where strangers whispered his name. But none of them truly knew the real story. As they approached the exit, a small child ran past them. His laughter rang through the air. He was chasing a tiny stuffed rabbit, which had slipped from his grasp. The toy tumbled across the floor, landing at Liam's feet. Liam bent down, picking it up. The child, no older than 4, hesitated before looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. This yours, buddy? Liam asked softly, holding out the rabbit. The boy nodded, but before he could take it, his mother rushed over, pulling him close. Her eyes flickered with recognition as she looked up at Liam. I'm so sorry, she stammered. Liam smiled gently, crouching down to the child's level. He's okay. He handed the toy back. What's his name? The boy clutched the rabbit tightly. Charlie, Liam chuckled. That's a good name. The mother swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I just want to say thank you, not just for this, but for everything you do. You don't even realize how much you mean to people. Liam held her gaze for a moment, then simply nodded. Take care of your little guy, he said, ruffling the child's hair before standing. As they stepped outside, Evelyn sighed, her breath visible in the crisp night air. You know, she murmured, you always had this way about you. Even as a little boy, people gravitated toward you, not because you're famous, but because you see them. Liam slipped his hands into his jacket pockets, staring out at the bustling city beyond the airport. He never set out to be anyone's hero. He had just tried to be a good man. A car pulled up, the driver stepping out to greet them. Evelyn gave her son a knowing glance. Before we go home, let's get some coffee. Just the two of us, like old times. Liam turned to her, the corners of his lips twitching into a smile. Sounds perfect. As they slid into the car, the city lights stretching endlessly before them. Neither of them knew that this night, this simple, unexpected moment, had already left ripples in the hearts of strangers. And somewhere in the quiet of a distant home, a daughter picked up the phone, dialing a number she hadn't called in a decade. The coffee shop was nearly empty, the quiet hum of the espresso machine filling the warm space. Liam and Evelyn sat by the window, watching the city breathe. It had been years since they had shared a moment like this. Just the two of them, away from flashing cameras and expectations. Evelyn wrapped her hands around the steaming cup in front of her. You remember when we used to sit like this in Toronto? She asked, her voice laced with nostalgia. Back when we didn't have much, but we always found a way to make things feel special. Liam nodded, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. I remember, he glanced at her, a flicker of sadness in his eyes. You always made sure I never felt like we were struggling, even when we were. She smiled softly, because we had love, and that was enough. Liam exhaled, leaning back in his chair. He wanted to believe that love was always enough, but life had taught him differently. He had lost too many people. His father had walked away when he was just a child. His best friend, Alex, gone too soon. His daughter lost before she ever had a chance to live. And then Sarah, his love, his almost forever, taken in the cruelest way. Evelyn reached across the table, squeezing his hand. You're thinking about them, aren't you? Liam didn't answer right away. He just nodded. Evelyn's grip tightened. They're never really gone, Liam. They live in the love you keep giving, in the kindness you show, in the lives you quietly change. He looked at her then, really looked at her. She had always been his rock, the one person who never wavered. But time was catching up with her. Her once steady hands had begun to tremble. Her once bright eyes now carried the weight of years. He wasn't ready for her to fade too. Mom, he said softly, his voice thick with unspoken emotion. Do you ever get scared? She tilted her head. Of what? Of what comes next. Evelyn was quiet for a long time. Then with a gentle smile, she said, I've lived my life, Liam. I've loved, I've struggled, I've laughed, I've cried, and I've been blessed with a son who has given me more joy than I ever dreamed possible. When my time comes, I won't be scared, because I know you'll carry me with you, just like you carry everyone you've ever loved. Liam swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around his coffee cup. He had spent his whole life learning how to live with loss, but nothing could prepare him for the thought of losing her. Before he could respond, the bell over the cafe door chimed, and a familiar voice called out, Liam? He turned, surprised to see a woman standing just inside the entrance. Her face was shadowed by the dim light, but as she stepped closer, his breath caught. It was her, a woman from his past, a name he hadn't spoken in years. And in that instant, the world around him seemed to pause. Evelyn, sensing the shift, looked between them, her expression unreadable. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't expected this. He wasn't sure he was ready, but fate had other plans. Liam's breath hitched. The cafe faded into the background. The dim lights, the quiet conversations, the city beyond the window. All of it disappeared as his eyes locked onto hers. She took a hesitant step forward, her expression a mixture of surprise and something deeper, something unspoken. Liam, she said again, softer this time, as if she wasn't sure he was real. Evelyn's hand rested gently on his arm, grounding him. Well, my dear, she murmured, her voice laced with quiet amusement. Aren't you going to say something? Liam blinked, pulling himself back into the moment. I wasn't expecting to see you. His voice was steady, but inside, a storm was brewing. She offered a small, unsure smile. Neither was I. Evelyn glanced between them, eyes twinkling with the wisdom of someone who had seen enough in life to recognize a moment that mattered. She patted Liam's hand and slowly stood. I think I'll give you two a moment, she said kindly before walking toward the counter. The woman, Claire, lowered her gaze for a moment, then looked back at him. It's been a long time. Liam nodded. It has. They had met years ago, in the in-between spaces of his life, before the loss, before the heartbreak hardened certain parts of him, back when he still believed in the idea of forever. Claire sat across from him, her fingers twisting the strap of her bag. I saw what you did tonight. For your mom, for that woman in the airport. You haven't changed. Liam huffed a quiet laugh, shaking his head. I don't know if that's true. She tilted her head, studying him. It is. The world changes. People come and go. But you've always been someone who sees people. Someone who makes them feel like they matter. Something inside him tightened. He had spent so much of his life giving to others, try to ease the burdens of those around him, but he rarely stopped to think whether he was seen. And yet, here she was, someone from his past, someone he had once loved. looking at him like he was more than just a name, more than just a quiet kindness he put into the world. "Are you back in L.A.?" he asked, his voice softer now. She nodded. "For a while, at least. I wasn't sure if I'd reach out. But then I saw you tonight, and I just—" She let out a breath, shaking her head. "I guess I just needed to say something." Liam watched her carefully. "Say what?" Her lips parted, but for a moment she hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she whispered, "That I never stopped caring." The words settled between them, heavy with history, with what once was and what could have been. Evelyn returned, setting her coffee down, but she said nothing, just watching them with quiet affection. She had always hoped Liam would find someone who truly understood him, someone who could love him not as a celebrity, not as an idea, but as a man. Liam exhaled, looking down at his hands. "You know, life has a strange way of bringing people back when you least expect it." Claire smiled. "Maybe it's trying to tell us something." A pause. A moment that felt like a crossroads. Evelyn reached for her son's hand again, squeezing gently. "You don't always get second chances in life," she murmured. "But when you do, you shouldn't ignore them.